Hi everyone, Redneck Computer Geek here. So, I've kind of debated how to go and do this video because it's not often I end up with a 2 for free deal where I think I can actually recover both machines. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the same intro on both. The first one is going to be this one. If you saw this as the thumbnail, it's obviously that machine. What's interesting here is we got pieces. Supposedly the motor ran a year ago. And we have chunkies. Supposedly it ran a year ago. Let's roll a little bit of footage on this one. And then over here, Jesse's checking out the Craftsman that we're going to grab. It's over here in the bushes. It's been here for a while. The lady says she's really not exactly sure what went wrong with it or why it's here. Apparently the husband was using it and he's not home right now to give us any info. But we'll see what we can do. Let's get the party started with this Craftsman here. We have a random chunk of metal in here. We're going to do a walk around on the machine. I would tell you to comment where it is that you think it's at, but apparently YouTube thinks all of you are children. So, you don't get to comment. Thank YouTube. So, it is a 15.5 horsepower. Obviously, it's a Briggs, judging from that sign on the side there. And here we go. Overhead valve, nothing too major. These, for some reason, always rust out on all of these machines. They're a big giant pain to deal with sometimes to take off, because a lot of times these, even though they're covered, are rusted in. But you can remove it and you can repaint it. Just be very, very careful about the edges of the voltage gauge on the side there. So it's obviously never been cleaned out, and we'll get a look at that more. The deck has some engineering done to it. I'm pretty sure that is not the way it's supposed to be from factory, but I give them kudos for a good try. And the deck belt that's on it is actually pretty new, so I'm going to bet it was running like that for quite a while. As we come around here, we'll take a look at the rear. It is a 930, I believe, maybe an MST. It's definitely not a Spicer. It's a 6-speed, so I'm going to bet it's an MST or a 930. So, did you figure out exactly where the chunk came from? I'll show you the other side of the motor here. There's that. There we go. So what is the chunk? Well, ta-da! That is gear oil. And that is a bull gear. That transmission is toaster strudels. Mr. Redneck Computer Geek, if the rear end's blown out, why would you lift up the front of the tractor? Well, dear YouTube, the answer is because in underneath here I reached in, and this is seized, which means that we need to get this belt, which I was hoping was a good belt, but you can see has chunks missing out of it. My finger's in. We need to get this belt off, because if we fire up this motor the way it is right now, that is going to bind, and it's going to bind on this, and we're just going to stall the motor over and over again and have no idea whether we actually fixed anything. The other thing is this has been sitting long enough for that to seize, which means this dry belt needs to come off also. And the easiest way to get this dry belt off is to jack this thing up so that we can get to this retainer here. We got a battery booster on. Carb linkages seem to be moving. We've got what looks like old, very old orange Gatorade colored gas. Let's see what it does. Well, that's interesting. So did anybody there on YouTube land happen to notice that it didn't sound like there was any compression? There's no spark plug. It's utterly missing. So there should be a spark plug going in from this direction, and it's not there. Nor is there any coil wire. I guess we're ripping the top of that motor apart to find out what's going on here, aren't we? Off camera, I took the time to go and stick a screwdriver down into the spark plug hole, and we definitely have piston moving on the inside. So we're going to take this to the next level and find out why there's no coil wire and spark plug coming out of here. Here we go. Oh. These tend to get stuck in this stupid tab over here, so watch yourself. Oh, utterly gone. Well, at least the screw holes look like they've still got thread in them. Sorry about that. Still got thread in them, so I'm going to bet it got robbed in order to fire up something else, potentially. This machine is a lot of random. But luckily, a friend of mine decided to drop off this John Deere Briggs. It's a 19.5, but it's got a coil on it that should swap over. So that's got a thrown rod in it as junk, so we're going to pull the coil off of that and see if we can make this thing do something. I fully admit that I don't have high hopes for this carb, but one of the things I can tell you is that something in the electrical is messed up. The coil kill wire is permanently killing the coil, so it's disconnected. But what I can tell you is if I toggle the ignition switch, I can feel the solenoid kick. So we're going to give it a shot and we're going to see what happens. No go. Alright, let's give it a bigger booster. Okay, bigger booster time, and here we go. Might help if I connect the spark plug. Okay, bigger booster, being smart enough to connect the spark plug. Here we go. Ever have one of those moments where all of a sudden you have an epiphany? Why didn't I think of that like 3 or 4 years ago? So this is the original winch that I bought in order to run in the bed of that truck when I originally built it. If you guys remember, I had a ball hitch there so that I could set the winch into the deck And it ended up sticking out a little bit too far, which is why we ended up with that winch that's hidden under the deck. Well, for years now, I have been using that chain hoist on hooks like this through my entire garage. See, there's one there, there's one there, there's another one down there. Why don't we just take a bolt and bolt it in so that that hitch plate can't move, so that we can take this 2,000-pound winch that has all of this extra cabling to attach plus a controller and hang it from that hook right there. So without question, Craftsman 42-inch decks of this vintage are definitely my favorite deck to remove. Because if they are done correctly, that is the only tool that you need. Okay? So what you do is you run around and you undo all of the cotter pins. But not quite all. You do 1, 2 on each side of this, 3, the one on the other side, 4 on the back side of this, 5, and then when we come around, if you have a newer one, you're going to have right here, see if I can do this on video, right here, this block here is your deck engagement on an older one. If you have a newer one, you're going to have a deck cable that swings through and comes back to this point. So, let's pop this off. Ready? 1. 2. 3. 4. 5. 6. And we're off. Obviously, if you didn't figure out that the belt had to be off of there, it's not my fault you failed that IQ test. Alright, let's take a look at the interesting MacGyvery of this deck. Out of all the pictures that I posted on Instagram and on the community tab on YouTube, this one definitely gets the most commentary. Yeah. That is interesting. Now, question. Oh. There. Well, now. That is rather swell. Well, for everybody that was yelling at me that that is not a good idea and knew why it was not a good idea, you get kudos. I don't mind showing when I fail, and here's why I failed. I chose the wrong type of winch to do this with. So when you unscrew this, it allows the cable to go out, except for it is pretty much an all or nothing. Either this is locked up, or it is totally freewheel and just dumped the front of that machine straight into the ground. That was not exactly my most brilliant thing. I didn't think about that. But what I do have is I have 2 or 3 of these really cheap winch mounts. And I've got a couple of spare 2,000-pound winches over in the back of the shop. One of which I got for free tractor hunting last year. And I think that if I take that and I weld a loop to it, right like that, I could do the same thing just using something more along the lines of a... This all needs to be cleaned, I know. So we've got that spare winch there. And we've got 2 or 3 of these that I could have for controllers. And yet again, go back to the idea of putting the battery over on the wall somewhere. Maybe use a lawn tractor battery and then a solar panel. But we'll go from there. That took about 15 seconds. With that, it would have taken me close to a minute or 2. That was awesome. Sold. Alright, so that is utterly shattered, and I'm gonna bet dollars to donuts the only thing holding it together was this. Ready? And ta-da! Detachable. Isn't that absolutely epic? Over here, we've got this Craftsman here behind these bottles that we ended up with for a freebie. And that came with this one that sticks a little bit, and also this one that should be just about the right size. Yep, that is a... well, it's an 8 3/4 pulley, and the one that's on there is a 9. So we're going to grab that, and we're going to run with it. Oh, you know what? I can't use that one. That's got an extended shaft right there. Well, crummy. Unless that unscrews from there, I wonder if it does. But if it's an extended shaft that stays, then I can't use it. Which means I have this one, which I could free up. It wouldn't take too much. But that pulley is definitely done. Okay, well, we'll get it figured out. But that one there is a match to the one that's in it, so I really should pull that if I can. Alright. Now to flip it over and do the other side. Uh-oh. Apparently I broke this C-clip. This is going to turn into tearing this apart too. Alright guys, I've done plenty of transmission rebuilds on the channel. Feel free to look around. Yeah, we'll be back. Alright, we're going to see if we can do this on video. But if we rotate this just a little bit, so we can see that that is where the axle was going through. And if we can manage to pull this gear out and lift it up carefully. Oh, it's going to be a twit. I'm going to lift this up. Come on. There we go. And then we're going to pull this gear out, and we're trying not to rotate it any more than we have to, and we're going to see if we can find the clip. We're going to hope it stayed stuck in the sludge. And that is it right there. That is the axle clip that we need. On today's episode of the most unappreciated tool for working on mower decks ever, it's a needle scaler. This thing is awesome for knocking off all of the grunge, the ick, the caca, the whatever you want to call it, for scaling off all of the steel and the metal. We're not out to take it all the way down to fresh steel. We're going to seal all of this, but we need to take the chunkies off before we do. So here's what they had on there. It looks as if it's just some leftover piece from some sort of project, but it was on there like this. And we've also got a hole here, but this is no big deal. We're just going to cut out a piece and weld it in, and we're going to have this pre-cut in it so that we can weld a bead right down through the center of it, and we'll be perfectly fine there. But this on the other hand, that is one heck of a cannonball hole. But we've dealt with this in the past. So what we have here is a good old-fashioned Craftsman seat. And what's interesting about these Craftsman seats is this curvature right here is not quite, but pretty close to the exact same curve right here, made out of just a little bit thinner sheet metal. This is about one grade down from what the deck itself is. Considering the condition of the deck and the condition of how good this is doing, I think we're upgrading right now. So we're going to slice this out, and we're going to lay it in here once we cut this out. This was a Craftsman lawn tractor seat. That's what's left of it, including this bracket cut in half, because now it is this. So this is what we cut out. There's that. And this is what we have now. My welds aren't beautiful, but they will hold. So there's that. This was the bracket that was the seat. Drilled some holes in it for adjustment to line up to there, like so. And if you're ever doing this and measuring this out, you measure from the hole height from the bottom up, not from the top down. And that's because the deck is thinner on this end than it is on that end, but the height level is based on this. So from here up is how you measure for hole height. So there's that. And if we flip this up, preferably without dropping it, we've got our patch there, which needs to be gone over one more time. And we've got the inner side of this. Is it perfect? Nope. But will it work? Yes. Oh, and the spindle on this side ended up not being blown. Somebody tightened that down too hard. So that one works. And that one works. So we're going to throw some paint on it and go from there. For everyone wondering what's taking so long, so this is day 3. And I don't know if you can see that, but that is snow. It's currently 36 degrees. It is snowing enough to accumulate. And apparently I topped it off with leaving my windows down last night. Stay tuned. Alright, so let's go take a look at it. Alright, so as you guys know, usually I clean them up and I have them all washed down and ready to go and all of that, the way I would have it if I was selling it. Except for this machine, at this point, I've got a lot of time into it. It most likely will end up staying with me and mowing my yard for a while until I manage to go and get the correct deck belt. The deck belt that is on it right now is just a regular standard belt, and it's not a Kevlar, and you can actually smell it starting to burn off just a little bit. So I'd rather get an actual Kevlar belt and put in the correct one. That way there's no problems. The other thing is this is a mishmash unit. We've got an LT1000 hood from like the 90s, and we've got the rear end from the 80s, which is why this is not matched up correctly, and the reason why I had to drive some self-tappers through here. So as it is right now, it's kind of a mongrel, and I'm probably just going to run it. Now, what would I retail it for if I was going to sell it, or when I sell it? If I had the correct deck belt on it so that it was running good and I knew that it continued to keep mowing after about 2 weeks to a month worth of use and stuff and was all happy, I'd probably retail it for somewhere around $400. But it really depends. If I take the time to paint this and match everything up, and if I was able to find a seat in slightly better condition, I could probably get the 400. Otherwise, I'd probably list it and be happy with 3. Thanks everybody for supporting. This one took a lot longer. I'm sorry, but there's more coming.